13 conservative counties in Oregon approved ballot measure for secession vote that would see them join non-woke Idaho as they issue list of demands. So there's a long path before they actually get to do anything like this. Idaho has to agree. Oregon has to agree. And then Congress has to agree. And I think the president has to sign off on it. That's never going to happen. But I guess the interesting thing here is that they're trying to make it happen. At least where they are, they agree it should happen. The question is it a good thing or a bad thing? I think it is better that people are represented by the government that they believe is of, for, and by them. And if they feel like they're being oppressed by Oregon's woke, psychotic policies and tax law and stuff like this, they have every right to change the nature of government. That's basically the founding of this country. But I wonder if polarizing in this way would actually just exacerbate tension between states.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that last part. I don't think we should be trying to split people up based on politics. I think this is only going to lead to more hyperpolarization, and I think that's what we're going to see here. I think the political consequences on the state level is going to be dramatic as well. I think both are going to have supermajorities of the. I think Oregon's going to be a Democrat supermajority, and then Idaho's going to probably have a Republican state majority. And I don't know. I don't think we should be redrawing the lines based on our political parties. So.
I think it's hard when you have, like, I think of Western Maryland versus, like, three counties in Western Maryland wanted to join West Virginia, right? Western Maryland represents or is much more similar to rural West Virginia, probably just because it's not as development, than Baltimore and the suburbs of Baltimore. So I could understand where you're like, hey, we have developed economically and geographically so that we don't actually have anything in common. We are under the same flag as a state, but you operate in a way that serves this part of the state and we don't feel any of the benefits. I could understand where then you would say, like, we experience the same challenges as this county and the other state that's right next to us. We want to be with them. I think you're right. You will see interstate tension if states were divided like this. Like, the prime example for this one is Idaho and Washington. The governors of Idaho and Washington have handled all kinds of issues incredibly differently. I mean, in terms of, like, sanctuary states for transgender identifying children, or laws governing if you can take a minor out of state to get an abortion. You know, they are kind of constantly messaging back and forth saying, like, hey, people who feel oppressed by that side, come here, or people who feel like this side has drifted too far to a progressive extreme, come here. And so maybe you would see a natural migration, but ultimately you have very, very different narratives sitting right on the same side of the line.
We shouldn't be annexing left and right with these states. We should be annexing up. Idaho should be annexing up, and so should Oregon.
Take Canada?
Take parts of Canada. Yeah, I think Alberta is right above Idaho. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what we should be taking chunks of, not of each other. I don't know what we're achieving here.
See, but I think that there is I think because we live in this era where, like, oh, these are the state boundaries and this is the way they are, we feel that way. But I don't think it's against anyone's right to say, like, hey, I don't think my government represents me. You know, I have economic issues, or I have, you know, challenges that the very urbanized capital doesn't experience. Like, why wouldn't you then say, I think I'm more similar?
These are all very rural areas that were dominated by Oregon's very liberal coastal area. Right. So, you know, they were like, we're never winning anything here. We don't have much representation. But again, we're just getting further politically divided in that way. And I guess politics is also relative. So we'll see how some of the blue dog Democrats in Oregon fare. So. And
it would affect everything. I mean, it would affect how many congressional seats they have. It would affect their census votes. I mean, it would really change things if
I doubt they have a lot of people. I bet these are all really, like, low populated counties.
Think how populated that is compared to the rest of Idaho. Like, would Idaho gain because they take in this population? Obviously, it's better than you know, you couldn't import people fast enough. This would be way faster. I mean, the birth rates in all of these states especially affect this. But do I think it's going to happen? It's very unlikely. I mean, in the case, again, I'm going to go back to the thing I know more about, which is Western Maryland. Basically, West Virginia was like, sure, we'd love to have you. Go talk to Baltimore. And Baltimore was like, no, thank you. You're staying right here because we
own you. Yeah. Because you give us money and resources. We ain't giving that up.
Yeah. And I think that's what ultimately will happen here. I mean, it's interesting to see, though, and I think it's good for them to try. I think this is what good local governments do for their citizens. Say, like, we aren't represented.
It wouldn't change the number of members of Congress. It wouldn't change the number of senators.
It'll change the state representation of, like, I guess the parts that are being annexed by Idaho will now be represented by Republicans instead of Democrats on the state level.
Let me ask you guys. The conservative area, how many members of, let's pull up the congressional map for Oregon.
And I'm saying I think it would be even more significant on like the state government level, like their state legislature is where I think it would be most significant for them.
So,
all the
yeah, it's Republican.
east side
it's all Republican.
Yeah,
So if
but
that
it's just one district.
Exactly. So if that one district joined Idaho, you got one Republican, probably the same guy, and then the amount of senators don't change.
I'm saying the majorities in the state Senate. So like right now for their state legislature, the East Coast is irrelevant, but now it will be Republican with.
Yeah,
Republican
honestly,
supermajority in their state level.
that could lead to extreme hyperpolarization, because Oregon may be constrained a little bit by the somewhat Republican influence of the eastern the eastern counties. The West, without any constraint at all, would just drive off the liberal cliff.
Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, I live in New York. I don't want any of upstate New York to start being grabbed by any states there. Like, you could argue this stuff for a lot of states, I feel like. So outside of cities, in the more rural areas.
You don't want like upstate New Hampshire and Vermont and New York State to form a coalition?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's not really red. New York's probably the reddest area in the Northeast. But I feel like a lot of states could do this. Most rural areas are more Republican compared to the cities. So...
What do you think's going to happen to Texas? Because you're in Austin, right? Austin's gotten pretty blue over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I love this show, and I've loved this conversation, but I do not give a fuck about this. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm not even trying to be aggressive or abrasive or anything. I just don't think it's going to happen. Maybe it'll happen. It's like the Texas secession thing, like you just brought up, too. I like the idea that a state can split away or join another state. I like the idea that the people can be represented by a different state if they want to and decide through a legal process to do it. But at this point, it's like, it's not going to fucking happen. I don't fucking care. You know?
Well, yeah, of course not going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing I said.
Yeah, you're right. I agree with you.
The question is, would it be good governance to allow states to dictate their borders?
Okay.
And
that's a good question. It probably would be good governance, in my opinion.
Because we're seeing more and more of it, especially in the Pacific Northwest with the state of Jefferson, which could be Northern California as its own.
It deeply troubles me the reasons that shit like this doesn't happen. Because congressional members are worried about shifting demographics in districts, and because it's about gerrymandering and whether or not it's going to increase or decrease congressional seats. Like, that bothers me, but it's like not going to happen. So I don't know. It's like when I see this type of thing in the paper, it's like the Joe Rogan bit. Next.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I think ultimately the fact that there are coalitions of people who are saying we are deeply unhappy speaks to what we were talking about.
Yeah, and if
before.
Texas voted to secede and it became like a war, I would sign up. I mean, I would do it, but I'm not like.
But I think there's a big difference between counties being like, we
Yes.
want to be represented by another
Right.
state. This won't affect the federal
It's not
makeup in
secession.
any way.
It's not secession. You're right.
Right. And so the reason I bring this up specifically is that you've got California and Texas who have their secessionist movements that want to leave the entirety of the country.
Cal exit and Texit.
But then you have the lesser of, how about instead of breaking the country apart, we just find better representation at the state and local level?
Right. Well, I'm not opposed to the notion that this should be allowed to happen. I guess.
Yeah, three Western Maryland counties wrote letters saying they wanted to secede from the state and join West Virginia. Mm-hmm. And then there's, I believe,
It'll change the tax revenue makeup a lot, so the legislatures locally will be upset about that if they're going to lose counties.
I don't know. It's true. Maryland's like, we're going to lose how much money if we do this?
Right.
However, I don't know how much money Maryland actually generates from the western counties.
Well,
they may actually spend more than they make.
Probably generate more than they spend, because I bet you most of the resources go to the urban areas. So when you lose revenue, even though it's even though it's an inexpensive part of the state, it negatively probably impacts the more urban areas disproportionately.
Maybe, but I don't know that in the rural areas enough is going on to generate any kind of revenue. Majority of the revenue is typically generated in the urban areas. That being said, I don't know what Baltimore's generating. Baltimore's got high crime. You know, people don't want to go there. It's kind of sad. You've got the Horseshoe Casino up in Baltimore, and when you go there, every 10 feet there's a sign saying something like "You are safe" or something like this.
I don't like it that they have to tell you that.
Which probably means
it's
you're
very
not.
stressful.
If I saw a sign that said "You are safe," I'd be like, "Shit, where's my gun?"
Well, you know, you're in Baltimore, so you can't have one. And then if you go further south, you have Maryland Live, and then actually just recently at MGM in DC, someone got robbed again and like stabbed or something. So,
but who was it?
some old guy at
Democrat
MGM.
or Republican?
Normie, probably.
I think the
too
issue
bad.
with Baltimore is that between Boston, New York, Philly, Baltimore, and DC, Baltimore is the worst one of the five of all these 5 cities next to each other, relatively so. Why would you ever stop there?
What's the demographic makeup?
In
Are you
Baltimore?
racist?
I'm not sure what is it? You
I
sound
thought
like you
to say,
know.
I'm not sure if I'm racist.
No, yeah,
What a fun take.
it sounds like you know the
I'm just fucking with you, man. I'm trying to ask difficult questions.
Thanks for watching this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to check out the live show Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. on this channel. Subscribe and we'll see you all there.